Good afternoon. Witnessing times of great technological advances is always exciting. Inventions of book printing, travel by air or internet, all this propelled us forward beyond our wildest dreams. Smaller things can be equally fun. I love my MP3 player. But technological advancement has all too often came at a great cost to us in many ways. To understand what I mean, we only have to look at, for example, the way in which the Hippocratic Oath has become violated because of the rapid advancement of technology. The knife and drugs became tools of choice in healing, while warmth, sympathy, and understanding are often reserved only for the relatives of the passed away patient. But even worse than this is the fact, as surgery and pharmaceutical drugs gained favor, people did not even realize how their dependency upon these two technological advances alone, they're making them less and less self-sufficient, and therefore more and more disempowered. So it is not an exaggeration to say that the advances within allopathic medicine, as great as they have been, have also come at a huge cost to us. It has left us bereft of all sense of self-sufficiency in terms of our own health and rendered us completely at the mercy of the so-called experts within the field of medicine. And in turn, the cost of this has been our utter dependency upon whatever the doctor says. But this is tantamount to handing our power to someone else, irrespective of the good intentions of the one to whom we have given our power. But how long can we continue to hand our power away to others before some unscrupulous individuals will start to see in this a gap to take advantage of our willingness to be disempowered? Yet this does not have to be so. Technology was meant to improve our lives, not make our lives worth less than they were before the advent. And nor was technology meant to disempower us and put us at the mercy of others by making us dependent upon those in the know. So where did they go wrong? The answer is actually quite simple. All that is required to answer this question is but a little thought to realize that it is not technology as such which is bad, but rather our indiscriminate romance with any new breakthrough in the world of technology. And within this lack of discrimination, we have all too often been blinded by the brilliance of the new discovery or invention, rather than to ask ourselves that age-old fundamental question: is this something which is life-supportive? Or is it something that is going to disempower us in some way? Truly great technological advances are those that enrich our lives and make our lives much more than was possible before the Advent. Yet these advances are few and far between. But even more rare are those that are truly life-supportive. These life-supportive inventions are centered not solely on the needs of humans, much less on the needs of a very small group of humans who are privileged, but rather on the needs of the whole of the animal and plant life of which we are a part. And it is my strongest belief that the invention of coherent multi-radiance therapy, abbreviated as coMra-Therapy, marks such a technological breakthrough in the field of medicine. Through the combined action of 4 radiances, infrared laser, color light emitting diodes, a magnetic field, and ultrasound, coMra-Therapy supports an organism's own healing ability with astonishing results. The 4 radiances modify function of cells at the most fundamental levels, such as synthesis of energy-transporting molecules, neurochemical messaging, and gene expression. Because of this universal nature of coMra-Therapy, it can be used to treat the most diverse conditions, and not only in humans, but also in animals, birds, and plants. And lastly, coMra-Therapy uses the radiances at such low power levels that these do not intrude and override cell functions. Hence, no side effects are associated with coMra-Therapy even after very extensive use. But because coMra-Therapy is such a recent discovery, and for many a completely new way of thinking about healing, there is a great need in education about coMra-Therapy. However, it is not only laymen, but even doctors and medical researchers who are not familiar with existing forms of low-level laser therapy or magnetic therapy may have questions about the nature of healing with the 4 radiances. This presentation opens a short introductory series about coMra-Therapy. In this first presentation, I would like to start with a broad introduction to coMra-Therapy and very briefly explain the action of infrared laser, LEDs, magnetic field, and ultrasound. In the following presentations, we will describe how to apply coMra-Therapy for treating various diseases and present the basic science of coMra-Therapy with all supporting scientific evidence. Although we will dive deep into the latest discovery of functioning of cells, protein synthesis, and quantum properties of matter, I will try to make it understandable without any prior special education. On the other hand, for benefit of those who want to do their own research, I will provide all relevant references to peer-reviewed publications, books, and other sources of information. coMra-Therapy is a novel approach to healing introduced by Radiant Life Technologies in 2009. The efficacy of coMra-Therapy for treating the vast majority of diseases, and especially the speed of recovery, are truly remarkable. But before I will consider the 4 individual radiances, I want to highlight several very important features of coMra-Therapy. First of all, coMra-Therapy is a completely non-invasive and non-destructive approach to healing. The 4 types of radiances employed in coMra-Therapy are used at such low power levels that they cannot damage the building blocks of an organism's cells and protein molecules. And thus, it directly corresponds to the prime statement of the Hippocratic Oath, primum non nocere, that is, firstly, do no harm. For example, the central component of coMra-Therapy, the infrared laser, is used at radiant power of only 10 milliwatts, and therefore it cannot create a thermal damage or burning in the irradiated skin or mucous membrane under any reasonable treatment time. Obviously, one has to take care and avoid eye exposure to the laser, just as with any laser product such as laser pen pointer. The direct consequence of the non-invasive nature of coMra-Therapy is that there are no associated side effects and negative interactions with other types of therapies. coMra-Therapy can be readily used as a standalone therapy or as a complementary therapy in situations such as recovery after surgery. A very important implication of this point is that after learning the basic principles how to apply coMra-Therapy to treat different medical conditions, users can safely experiment on their own and find the best combination of treatment courses for their unique medical history, health condition, and available time and place for treatment. Secondly, it is very important to understand that coMra-Therapy is not aimed against a specific causative agent of a disease or its particular manifesting symptom. Instead, it supports the body's own healing ability through acceleration of energy metabolism in cells, initiation of neurochemical messaging cascade that trigger regenerative responses in cells, and gentle mechanical vibration that further accelerates the healing process. What follows from the non-specificity of coMra-Therapy is a very important implication. coMra-Therapy can be successfully used to treat the most diverse conditions, from skin diseases to bone growth retardation, from sinusitis to migraine, and from diabetes to lung cancer. And lastly, from purely practical point of view, technology in manufacturing of high-quality laser diodes and other electronic components progressed sufficiently relatively recently and made it possible to implement fully the principles of coMra-Therapy in a small, compact device at a very reasonable cost. Consequently, in 2010, Radiant Life Technologies launched the Delta Laser, a device that embodies all the principles of coMra-Therapy. I am now going to explain the mechanics of coMra-Therapy. In a nutshell, coMra-Therapy works by firstly providing energetic support for diseased cells to restore their respective functions, and secondly by initiating neurochemical messaging cascades that rally support of all vital systems of an organism. But to put things into perspective, let us briefly consider disease itself. It is important to understand that all diseases, independent of their origin, at a certain stage manifest in cells that constitute our bodies. The finely tuned biochemical orchestra of all the vital processes in a cell goes out of balance. As a result, the normal functioning of cells become impaired, and we start to have physical symptoms such as headache, inability to digest food, or insomnia. Normally, if we correct the primary cause of the disease and given proper rest, cells can regenerate themselves back to normal condition, or even adapt and become stronger. However, if the stress continues day after day or even years after years, immune system inevitably becomes overworked and depleted due to constant state of high alert. At this point, the gates are open for any virus or bacteria to intrude. Alternatively, the weakest organ or a whole subsystem starts to fail. To summarize, a diseased cell doesn't mean dead cell. Given proper support, it will regenerate itself back to normal state. And this is exactly what coMra-Therapy does. Let us consider the first component, infrared laser, and the energetic support it provides to cells. An infrared laser diode is the central component of coMra-Therapy. It sets the overall pace and coherency of the healing process. The primary role of the infrared laser is to increase efficiency of the production of the universal fuel of all living cells, the ATP molecule. Adenosine triphosphate is an energy currency inside all living cells, and its importance is difficult to overestimate, for it powers all processes that are needed for a cell to grow and thrive. Energy stored in the chemical bonds of ATP is released when ATP breaks down into its constituent parts, adenosine diphosphate and phosphate. and that energy can be used for performing work: muscular contraction, digestion, working of the immune system, vision, wound repair, synthesis of proteins, nerve impulse conduction, blood coagulation, plus many other processes of what we call life. None of them is possible without ATP. The rate of synthesis of ATP inside cells from the recycled parts of adenosine diphosphate and phosphate is most crucial for a healthy cell. Daily generation volume of ATP is huge and reaches almost the organism's weight in humans. Not surprising that ATP depletion in a cell is a universal red flag for any type of disorder in any type of cell. Once ATP drops beyond certain critical level, all energy-dependent functions cease and the cell dies. The fact that low energy light of certain wavelengths or colors stimulates ATP production was discovered in the 1960s, and this experimental evidence forms the foundation of the low-level laser therapy, the precursor of coMra-Therapy. Experiments have demonstrated that mitochondrion, a cell's ATP factory, can absorb light's photons of certain wavelengths and increase output of ATP. And this is a point of primary importance. By restoring ATP content in a cell, the infrared laser can support functioning of any type of cell, be it in muscle, bone, nerves, or skin. Therefore, the universal nature of healing ability of light should not come as a surprise. Since the initial discovery of therapeutic action of low-level lasers, vast body of experimental evidence was collected by scientists. Clinical trials demonstrated efficacy of a low-level laser therapy for over 100 medical conditions: allergy, arthritis, asthma, cancer, cerebral palsy, diabetes. The list goes on and on. Even simple listing of the conditions would take several pages. In coMra-Therapy, we employ laser diode of the near-infrared part of the optical spectrum. And because biological tissues are most transparent to such light, the infrared laser can deliver energy directly to deeply lying organs, blood vessels, muscle and bones without any destructive intervention, provided it is fully coherent, and this is dependent on spectral width. But despite numerous studies, the nature of the primary interaction of light with ATP-producing enzymes until very recently remained uncertain. One experimental fact, however, is most interesting. Effect of infrared laser was found to be strongly enhanced in presence of magnetic field. Therefore, let us consider the next component of coMra-Therapy, the magnetic field. In coMra-Therapy, magnetic field works hand in hand with the infrared laser, supporting the process of ATP synthesis in a cell. Therapy with magnetic field, or magnetotherapy, has a very long history, but the term itself appeared in the late 19th century. After the Second World War, a number of research groups in Japan, Soviet Union and Eastern Europe investigated magnetotherapy. By 1970s, magnetotherapy became widely spread and was shown to be effective for conditions such as diabetic neuropathy, wounds and fractures, chronic pain, osteoarthritis, and others. And in the 1990s, the effect of infrared laser and magnetic field were found to be mutually enhancing. Magnetic infrared laser therapy, or MIL therapy, the immediate precursor to coMra-Therapy, was discovered. But the actual physical process that would lead to chemical changes and modifications of cell functions was still unknown. In 2005, a most fascinating discovery was made. Experiments have demonstrated that ATP production in cells increased by 2-3 times in the presence of magnetic isotopes of metal cofactors. The authors of the discovery suggested that so-called radical pair mechanism is responsible for the observed effect. But as we know from physical chemistry and quantum physics, the radical pair mechanisms directly links the combined effect of light and magnetic field on the rate of chemical processes. I will go into more details in the following presentations. Here I want to give you just a general picture. Along with the normal pathway of ATP generation, there is a possibility for a complementary pathway of ATP synthesis through inducing a higher energy state of the reactants using laser excitation. However, this state of excitation is extremely short-lived, only a few nanoseconds, and not all molecules have enough time to be converted to the final product, the ATP molecule. But magnetic field extends the lifetime of radical pairs by more than 1,000 times, enough to complete the process of ATP synthesis through their higher energy pathway. To summarize the action of infrared laser and magnetic field, they both pass through the skin, deep into body, and directly restore ATP deficit in cells caused by a disease. This is why very often an immediate relief is reported by coMra-Therapy users after a treatment. The next two components of coMra-Therapy, color LEDs and ultrasound, activate skin-embedded parts of nervous, immune, and endocrine systems by initiating neurochemical messaging cascades. And this is very important to understand, because once activated, the defense and regenerative systems of the body carry on healing effect for hours and days after treatment. The contribution of LEDs to the overall effect of coMra-Therapy is very different from the infrared laser, because light of these wavelengths do not penetrate very deeply, only about 4 millimeters, and is mostly absorbed by skin. So let us briefly look at the different functions of skin. The skin is the largest organ in human body that protects its internal balance. But far from being just a static barrier, skin is also an endocrine and immune organ interwoven with fast and precise nervous communication system and slower blood and lymph transport system. Let us look at the following diagram, a cross-section of the skin. Here, for example, we see a nervous terminal embedded within the skin, and here we see 3 different kinds of immune cells also embedded within the skin. In the next diagram, we can clearly see the subcutaneous layer of the skin and the muscle underneath, and we can also see blood vessels permeating both. Now, if we take, for example, a skin injury, sensory nerves in skin will not only relay the information to the central nervous system that the first line of defense was breached, brain registers the ouch, but the nerves also release a host of messenger molecules in the immediate vicinity of injury. These messengers activate the second line of immune defense, immune cells that reside directly in skin and those that circulate in blood and lymph, and so inflammation starts. Together, the skin-residing nerves, immune and endocrine cells, through chemical communication between each other and with the rest of the body, fight off invaded substances and promote tissue regeneration. It is important to understand that although skin-produced messengers act mostly locally, they also enter systemic circulation and modify activity of the distant organs. And all of this is done under supervision of the central nervous system that orchestrates a coordinated response of the whole organism. The fact that sunlight affects endocrine and immune function of skin is very well known. For example, the most well-known endocrine factor directly produced in skin by ultraviolet light is vitamin D3, that is vital for bone growth and immune system functioning. But now we also know that light of certain wavelengths in a visible spectrum or colors has profound modulation effect on skin neuroimmunoendocrine functions. But how exactly does light do this modulation? To answer this question, we need to go back to the ATP molecule, because it is not only a universal fuel inside cells, but also when released outside of cells, it also acts as a universal language that cells use to talk to each other. As a neurotransmitter, ATP is directly involved in excitation of sensory nerves, perception of pain, and neural control of immune and endocrine organs. And when released by non-neural cells, ATP triggers protective responses, such as bone building and cell proliferation. Once the immune and endocrine cells become activated, they not only promote healing effect locally, but mobile immune cells and secreted messenger molecules also travel through blood and lymph to distant sites, causing a systemic healing effect. And lastly, I would like to note that in coMra-Therapy, the red, indigo-violet, and yellow-green LEDs are applied in sequence because this greatly enhances their effect. We do not know why the sequencing works so much better, but it was established experimentally. When scientists studied how light of different colors stimulates cell growth, they found out that blue light boosts growth of cells by about 130%, growth without light taking as 100%, and red light by about 140% when applied individually. But when applied in sequence, these two colors act additively, reaching 170%. The fourth radiance, ultrasound, provides a gentle mechanical impetus, accelerating all the processes started by the other three components of coMra-Therapy. Ultrasound is a mechanical vibration just as any normal sound, but with a frequency above human hearing. When ultrasounds pass through tissue, it creates a continuous train of expanding and contracting zones. This expansion and contraction makes the molecules to oscillate or vibrate. As a result, there is a very slight warming up, but most importantly, the transport and synthesis of all the molecules that cells are producing becomes much easier. From biological point of view, the gentle mechanical vibration greatly enhances productivity of enzymes, the special assembly lines in cells that construct other necessary molecules. Perhaps an analogy would make it clearer. If you put metal chips on a sheet of paper and place a magnet under the paper, the magnetic field will start slowly reorganizing the chips into an ordered pattern according to the shape of the magnetic field. But if you start tapping slightly on a chip, the reorganization will happen much more quickly. In coMra-Therapy, the first three components play the role of the magnet in this analogy. Infrared laser, magnetic field, and LEDs provide energy and direction of the healing process. Ultrasound, on the other hand, speeds up the chemical processes involved in the regeneration of the diseased cells. It is very disheartening to see that the Hippocratic Oath has become so violated these days. As I already mentioned earlier, knife and drugs became tools of choice in healing, and with that, doctors, generally speaking, forgot the prime statement of the Hippocratic Oath. Firstly, do no harm. The discovery of coMra-Therapy can change the situation. It brings highly effective, affordable, and versatile healthcare into hands of everyone who is willing to take care of their own health and be self-sufficient. But remember that no device can heal your body. It is you who must make the decision to give your body love and care. And the role of coMra-Therapy is to translate the power of your decision through technology into a language that the diseased cells and organs can understand and respond to. We at Radiant Life Technologies all wish you long, healthy, and fulfilling life. Thank you.